Right, more people committed suicide in the United States last year than in any year on record dating all the way back to 1941. Now, according to provisional data recently released by the National Centers for Health Statistics, the number of lives lost to suicide in 2022 totaled more than 49,000 and represents more than 14 deaths for every 100,000 people. While the legacy media rushes to provide possible explanations for the despair that so many feel. COVID, we're still using COVID as an excuse. There's something missing from this discussion, and it's the spiritual nature of man. You cannot really talk about hopelessness and despair if you're not willing to talk about the spiritual nature that we have as human beings. Join me now to discuss this, Dr. Jennifer Bauwens, director of the Center for Family Studies here at the Family Research Council. Dr. Bauwens has extensive clinical and research experience working with survivors of trauma and abuse. Dr. Bauwens, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
Good to see you too, Tony.
So I want to start off with, according to this data, it's pretty alarming. Mm-hmm. Who's at greatest risk?
So we're looking at, there are a number of different ethnic groups, but we're kind of focused here on a group that we don't often think about, and that's males who are 75 and older. And, you think, why on earth would this population, white males, 75 or older, be at risk for suicide? And I'll kind of draw this comparison, because when we look to some of the things that happen with post-traumatic stress, sometimes you see this age group, they may not show any symptoms until they start retiring. Right? So they go into retirement, maybe they have a loss of a spouse or loss of relationships, a loss of meaning, right? They're not productive in that sense of what they've lived their whole life in. And so now they're faced with, what is my life about? And I think that, whether we're talking about this age group or we're talking about just our whole world right now, is saying, what is life about? And we know that from the suicide literature that religion, social support, having a sense of meaning and purpose in life is very protective. It prevents people from committing suicide.
They have a purpose.
They have a purpose. And that's what we're not seeing happen in our world.
But isn't that one of the big questions, one of the big 5 questions we ask in life? Why am I here? Where am I going? What's my purpose? In this, all of those questions are answered in a relationship with your Creator. And so I know, and I'm very open about this, I'm looking at this as a Christian and as a Bible-believing Christian, but when I look at all these articles that are, sounding the alarm over this data, there's zero conversation about the spiritual nature of man.
Yeah, even though the literature recognizes that having a spiritual belief or a religious affiliation is protective against suicide. And yet that's what we're seeing decline in our world. So we should be emphasizing that in every sector of our society is find a place of faith.
So do you think, and I know you'd have to look and study all of this, but is there a connection between the marginalization and the exclusion of religion as a society and these rising rates of suicide, depression, anxiety?
There has to be. I don't even have to do a big study. There has to be a connection because we are wired to have a meaningful, purposeful life and to have that through connection with God.
Is that what Jesus said? And I quote at the beginning of the program in John 10:10. Jesus said that I came that you might have life and have life abundantly, not just to survive. I believe God intends for us to thrive.
He absolutely intends for us to thrive. And the other part of that verse is, and the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And people aren't recognizing that there is an enemy that we are battling who is about killing us, stealing from us, and destroying us. So if you don't have an anchor in Jesus, when your world falls apart, like we talked about at the beginning here, when you retire or maybe you have loss, where are you going to turn? You have to have that person, Jesus, as the anchor of your soul.
So give us some action steps here to either to be looking for, to respond to. How do we address this? Because it's touching everyone.
Yes. And I think as believers, and I know many of our viewers and listeners are, we are not immune to the attacks of the enemy, the stealing, the killing, and destroying. And so we need to recognize that there is an attempt to steal our hope in this hour. But I really believe that if we can remain hopeful in the face of adversity, we are going to have the most influence, because people are looking for hope-filled people. And when we can rise up in the midst of what's going on in our world and say, there is a way through this, and there is a way to not just through, but to thrive. And we can only get that in connection to the Holy Spirit. That's not something that we can drum up, but that comes through relationship with Jesus. And because he is hope. And if we're not anchored in that hope, we can't offer that hope.
And we know him through his word. And as Christians, as believers, we need to be in that word, because that's really what I think I would say even inoculates us to the attacks of the enemy, the hopelessness, the despair that often comes on everybody in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, too, just at a very practical level, if you know people who are in these age groups, or people who've experienced some of the risk, they've been through a loss of a job or a loss of a family member or friend, reach out to them, visit them, because, we are the hands and feet of Jesus, and we show that connection with him.
So we're up against a break, but very quickly, so it doesn't have to be anything profound. It's just coming alongside, having conversations, and doing life together.
Absolutely. It's not complicated.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are always hesitant. I just don't know what to say. Just go have a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Presence.
Yeah.
Be present.
Presence. Very good. Jennifer, always great to talk with you.
You too.
Thanks for stopping in.